Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special night this Thursday night. If you're watching from YouTube, this is also super special. Thank you guys for watching. But we have someone who I've admired for a while now, who does amazing work and is doing groundbreaking stuff in the literary field. This is Brandon Dixon of Swordsfall, the latest graphic novel he produced. It's right here, Drift of Dreams. If you have not read it, I encourage you to do so. I and other fans have been left in tears by the end of it, and it's just part of this amazing world that Brandon has made over at Swordsfall, which is an Afropunk sci-fi fantasy universe, which I'm all too excited to explore. So Brandon, since we have you here, well, I think one of the big questions I have for you as you began this whole venture, looking back, I believe you have 13 books out right now, in one form or another.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yeah, there's a website, lots of information, Anvil and stuff like that. A whole world you can explore. Looking back, from where you are now to where you started, what are your thoughts?
It's been a pretty wild ride so far, I have to say. It's been it's weird because it's in a way I was prepared. It's like how to make this sound like not cocky, but like I didn't want to do this just to do one thing and fade away. You know what I mean? Like I legitimately wanted to be here to stay, which meant I had to do certain things and I had to hit like a certain size, like it was like I was very realistic about what it took. And I think for some people that turns them away. And for me, I took it more as a challenge. So it's the kind of the weird satisfaction of, oh, hey, like, not that I planned it exactly how I wanted, but like I hit most of the markers I wanted to, you know what I mean? So it's this kind of cool, like you did what you wanted to, but it was also different than I thought how it was going to be. So that's been a learning experience a lot. So it's been a ride. Like there's no other way to put it. It's just like a
Yeah.
wild ride.
I bet, man. Just going through all of the literature and the information on the website, it's a very in-depth world. One of the things I'm really fascinated by, not just by the people and the culture we get to learn about in Drift of Dreams, but also the Jalen, from one of your other previous books. What was kind of the creation of the Jalen, and what do you see kind of like their role in being long term for this world?
So it's interesting because I don't really create. I didn't create any of the professions like in their own bubble per se, right? So one of the reasons why, and I think it gets on people's nerves sometimes, but I do it for a reason. It's why I correct people when they're like, "Oh, like this TTRPG," and I'm like, "No, Swordsfall is a universe." And I think sometimes people think I'm doing it for like the branding or whatnot, but I'm doing it because I have to get people to understand mentally how I made it. Because if you think about the construction, like a tabletop RPG, is there's nothing wrong with that method, but that's not what I did, right? So I didn't take a playable class in a TTRPG and then add lore. It's a profession in a world that I took and made a game using. So that's the biggest difference, and that's why Swordsfall feels in depth, because I think about it as a world, as its own living, breathing world, and then I go, cool, like I really want to do X medium, and then I either go with whatever idea pops into my head, or sometimes I go, I really want to highlight this thing. So at Summit of Kings, that's what it was. Jalen's have been there since, man, the beginning of Swordsfall. Like the World Anvil's gone now, but like it was one of like the first things that's up there. It's mentioned very early because the name Jalen is actually an actual thing. So one of the things that I love about Swordsfall is I teach you about history without teaching you history. And it's one of those things I picked up just from watching like TV shows. Like right now I'm going through all of Stargate SG1 for like the eighth time again. And it just kind of cracks me up how in a way it teaches you all this mythology. And it's always struck me of how like in a way like media is a really good vehicle for education if you don't call it education, right? Like nobody wants to
Yeah.
be taught sometimes, but like learning lore and getting into like a story or a movie, I mean that's what you're doing. You're educating yourself on this stuff. So when I do like my research for because basically I just have to research like Africa as a whole, right? Because it's just hard to find specific information on specific cultures or tribes. So you kind of just have to go into it as like a researching the whole continent,
Yeah.
which it's its own daunting thing, but you find little gems here and there, and you find this little term and this little thing, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. That's really interesting. And some of it is so palpable. I'll come across like a little piece in a book, and I go, like, I look around, I'm like, how is this not a movie already? Like, how is this not a thing? Like, as is, it's badass. I don't even have to fantasize it. I can just add a little color to it, and then boom, it just pops off the screen. So that's kind of what Jalen's are. Like Jalen's are the actual African thing is more about, think of it kind of like you have like church hymns and whatnot where it's
Yeah.
not just enough to say it, it's about how you say it. So like the song adds an element to it. Well, like Jalen's are the African principle, the same thing, but like almost more of in a spoken poetry. So you're not singing it, but they're basically speaking about the culture, and there's like it's hard to describe in like a it's one of those things you almost have to National Geographic see it to understand it, but it's almost like if you imagine poetry, but poetry is specifically designed to teach you about like the tales and the tradition. So kind of like if you rhymed out a lullaby, that's kind of what the real ethos of Jalen's were. So I was reading that and I'm like, it struck me. I was like, this makes me think about how like rap isn't just something that like Black Americans just kind of made up one day. Like there's a probably had like a tribal like entomology from it, because there's elements to that you find. And I'm like, well, that kind of means that rappers are confirmed bards. So it just kind of popped in my
Yeah.
head, and that's how Jalen's as like the profession in the world became, because that's what they are, right? They're kind of like a street philosopher, right? They're your everyday person's philosopher, because like the common person needs someone to tell their stories and know the things that they do, because like not every tales should be about the heroic person. Sometimes the average person has a really compelling tale, and that's what Jalen's kind of encompass. So I wanted to take the Black American kind of angle of what rap and hip hop means, and then I kind of merged it with this like African underpinnings, and then I use the African name, and that's what I do for a lot of Swordsfall stuff. So I know what's happened to some people, but if you start googling some stuff in Swordsfall, you'll start to find like these like history entries, and you'll go to like this BBC entry and this wiki entry, and people are like, oh, because I take a little stuff because I want to do the same thing for African lore that like stuff like D&D and Lord of the Rings has done for like Eurocentric forever, right? And it just feels like whenever we
Yeah.
get to the African side, that's instantly when we stop doing research, and it's like, well, no, let's find out all the cool like little unique ancient stuff, and we don't have to be one-to-one historically accurate, because guess what? Other folks don't either. But we also have the chance to be accurate when we need to be. So it's like for me, I try to be like accurate in a like a respectful sense. Like I'll change the names if I know it's like a living culture that like wouldn't be too happy with it. Like cool, I'm not trying to like stomp on that. So I'll change the name and just kind of take the ethos of it and still be respectful. And when stuff is like dead and like hasn't been around for a while, and I feel like it's something that would be nice if people would know again, I'll use the name, kind of hoping and knowing in like egotistical sense, Swordsfall will be big enough that this name will start to trend more, and then people will go look it up, and that kind of really does happen, So like that's like my secret ulterior motive, and it's also one of those things that gives me pleasure. Like now that I just brought out the Naruto game that I kind of like twisted into a Swordsfall, having people say axums and knowing that that's like a direct Ethiopian thing, like that's cool. So like I don't know. So stuff like James is always like that. I'm always just baking the lore and baking the world, and then go, cool. This would make a cool game. This would make a dope anime, and that's kind of what I do.
Which is definitely interesting, bringing in all these different concepts from other mediums as well as other geographical locations. And now that I know, like, I can look them up and check out their kind of real world counterparts. I'm gonna have to go through the lore and figure
There's a
out
bunch, like most of the professions are like that. Like a good chunk of the professions are either pretty much if it's a name that you're like, ooh, that's an interesting name. I haven't heard that before. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How
That's
about the
probably
gods?
same thing. A good chunk of the gods are gods I've actually taken from mythos. Some names I tweak because just straight up, it's I try to keep it as base as possible, but I do have to accept the fact that like I am American and that there is English is going to be the primary thing, and that there are some names that are just hard to pronounce in English. So I try to keep the name the same, and I'll tweak it to be like just slightly more pronounceable, you know. So, but other than that, I try to keep it. And same things apply. If it's a living religion where I know that like they would frown on that, I'll
Yeah.
change the names. But unfortunately, African cultures have enough uh, pre-colonial and ancient religions that no longer are followed, that you don't really have to worry about that, which sucks in its own way. But but there's a lot. The names of
Yeah.
like I won't spoil it, but if people really wanted to do the whole like national treasure, get really into it, well, Welcome to Tycho comes out, like there's years of research of Easter eggs. Like it's there's a reason why it takes so long. It's a really big project. Like I I try to I try to research everything I can all the time. Like, not to say that I'm just sitting here reading all the time, but the first thing I do when I come to like a new part in the road when I need to make something, the first thing I do is I go research. So I'm like, okay, I need a mountain range. Instead of just instantly making up a mountain range, I instantly go to like my Africa map, and I'm like, cool, for the geological area I'm in, what mountain range am I at in Africa? And then I look it up, and then I look up all the stuff about it, and I kind of go, cool, do I want to use this? Like, so every time you get to something in Swordsfall, I've done that with every single city, every single forest, desert, everything. So it takes me a while because I had to sit there and chew on it and be like, do I want to use this? And how will this reflect? And will it reflect in a good way? And then I have to Google to make sure that like there's no messiness, because like when you're not a part of the culture, you don't always know that, oh, that mountain range that according to the dictionary and wiki sounds cool, but culturally that's where this terribly bad stuff happens,
Yeah.
and saying the name is terrible, what I mean? So I had to go and do my due diligence, make sure I'm not being a colonizer, right? So it just takes time, but it's really enjoyable. I think it's what makes Swordsfall pop, because like I am taking real stuff and I'm just kind of thinking about it in a modern fantasy way, because some things are like you do want to make it that extra level of cool. So you're like, cool, well, this historical thing is cool, but like how can I make it like fantasy cool, so
Yeah. And I do very much like the learning without knowing you're being educated aspect of it. Cause definitely like looking back on all like the Western fantasy and stuff like that, you're definitely getting some education there, even if you're not realizing it. And being able to get it from a source set is different. It's really
well,
cool.
that's why people's defense the first time like you want to change something in diversity, go but history. So we have to be realistic that people do see it as an educational tool, or they wouldn't talk about realism in history to debate stuff. So
Yeah, no, that's
I
fair.
feel like it's one of those things you have to
So your new amazing book, Drift of Dreams, follows dream weavers in a pretty significant event that occurs in the book. I don't want to give spoilers for those, who haven't gotten the chance to read it, though I do encourage you to go check it out. It's on Amazon as well as the Swordsfall website. All this information, if you're watching on YouTube, will be right below. If you're watching right now, we should have it to your right here soon, or popping through the chat throughout. So Dream Weavers, was this something that you kind of took, like we were talking about before, from a culture or a significant role in Africa, and just kind of fantasize it, or
In a way,
Dream.
I always call it, like, mentally I call it, I dunk it in Swordsfall sauce, because I imagine like I made this brew sauce, that's my world, and then I take something realistic from world and I go, cool, it's mine now. So, you know.
Yeah.
But Dreamweaver is kind of combination of a lot of things that I've seen. And I think it's one of those things that's common, like whenever you get to like an indigenous culture of any kind, like how we see dreams is like one of the first things people talk about. Like, it's just, pick a culture, they have dream more because someone falls asleep, you have a wild dream, and like it's how do you not, right? So, and usually the question is, how does a culture treat dreams? Do they think that it's a vehicle to the future? Do they think it's like a window into the psyche? Do they think it's the devil talking to them? So really it's a question of like, how does X culture feel about dreams? And so in African cultures, I mean, they dreams and how it's treated is one of those things that, while it just varies wildly from culture to culture, tribe to tribe, because it is a very personal thing that they take. So with Dreamweavers, instead of making it one specific thing, because there really wasn't any one specific model that felt like it was good to add to Swordsfall, I instead just imagined it in terms of the world itself. So if the bulk of African lore acknowledges that dreams are powerful, and also that like dreams are something that humans need, and also like sometimes with prophecies, sometimes it's random. So like, how does that fit into this world? And so that's when I imagine in a sense that like, if a culture believes in this stuff but also knows it's true because the gods are literally on the planet, then it becomes more of a like almost like a Stargate, which is why I like watching Stargate, because Stargate's kind of like that. It's like, well, sure, there's aliens, but like, what if you literally had a way to go to all those planets instantly and take all the travel crap out? Like, Dreamers is kind of the same thing. So like, what if dreams are connected like we said they are, and you can go to them whenever you want to? Like, that's kind of where Dreamweaver is. So, and in my world, I don't particularly like to have professions that feel like lone wolves, because in real life that's not how it works. You know, we learn in groups. Like, that's kind of the thing about a profession. That's why everything is a community, because there's usually more than one person who's also interested in X thing, and together you can grow or protect each other. You know, like, there's that solace in groups. And so that's kind of how I imagine it. And I wanted to imagine it in a positive way, which is always how I do Swordsfall, instead of it being like dystopian, where it's like, you know, there's this committee that controls dreams, and you know, like, because I feel like that's where most people will go. Like, instead I was like, no, like, they're explorers, but wherever you have explorers, you have protectors, because that's just how it, there's like a natural thing to it. One person wants to go somewhere, and another person is like, I kind of want to go, but I also want to make sure you're okay. That's just kind of how the world works, and we like that connection, because, like, you know, there's like a symbiosis to that. Like, so Dreamweavers are kind of the same thing, and when you read through the graphic novel, like, you'll get that feel. There's always people who want to explore, and, you know, people who want to protect, and like, there's a mutual sense to that. And I just wanted to explore that and have that kind of be a thing. So they're the ones who explore the dream world and like protect it, not because it's this terrible place, but because like life is random, and sometimes things just happen for no particular reason. You're driving along and your tire blows. Did something happen? Nope, it was just the time, right? So it's just one of those things. Is I imagine it in terms of, okay, if a dream world is connected, someone's gonna have to change the tire occasionally. Someone's gonna have to, you know, fix the leaky pipe. That's, you know, things have to be maintained. So that's what dream movies are. But instead of a leaky pipe, it's a leaky dream. You know, and And it was also a fun way to play with all the things that I think connect people in those ways that we don't expect. Because just like I find it interesting whenever we have those, is this you? And people are like, oh, this is so me. I feel attacked because like we're different, but we're not that different. We're like different in the like 8 different colors in the MMM like bag kind of different, not like 68 million different, you know what I mean? But like, and that's not a bad thing. And that's what makes us feel connected. We're like, oh, my person, my tribe, my people, you know? So finding little elements that do that connects people to the story. So I thought it would be interesting to be like, not explain, but it's like, hey, if you've ever felt like you were having this terrible nightmare, and then all of a sudden, like, your grandma shows up in the dream and helps you. What if that wasn't your dream grandma? What if that was actually your grandma? Like that just it hits different, you know what I mean? And like, what if that
Yeah.
terrible nightmare and that creature chasing you, what if it really was a creature? You know what I mean? So like you get to play with stuff like that, and just imagine dreaming with other people who show up to fight the creature, and you're like, man, I had this weirdest dream, and I was chased by this creature, and then this person showed up and fought it, and it was like, I don't know, it was weird. Anyway, like so, and that's kind of Swordfall because when you're doing your job, like no one knows you did it well, right? So like, and dreamers are
Yeah.
kind of those people.
No, that's fair.
People don't think about them much because when they're doing their job right, like you don't notice them, you know. And Drifter Dreams is like what happens when things go bad. And it's a kind of a reminder that, oh, yeah, thanks, Dreamweavers, for keeping all that straight for us. I appreciate that, you know?
Yeah. And especially I guess kind of the main character, the Seeker, discovering, like, watching her journey and stuff, especially at the end there. And I'm desperately trying not to give away too much information.
Which by the way, the Seeker goes by they.
My apologies. Yes, they.
No worries. Which is a weird thing to try to figure out how to add that into a story without like it's there, but I'm still in my way trying to figure out like, do I just straight put up like pronouns on the back of the book? We might get that way. We'll see. But yeah, so.
No, I totally agree. I'm doing art direction and trying to communicate to the artist, you know, they, them, in terms of a character without like any words is always kind of a challenge to try to figure out how exactly to communicate that. And it's really interesting. You got 10 different artists to do the graphic novel. What kind of made you go to that kind of style? Because it almost feels like an anthology from like was it anime or Love, Death, Robot in that way, where you kind of have these threads. It changes every now and then with these new artists.
Well, that was kind of my idea. So like, I'm going to be slightly controversial. I didn't like the Animatrix. I liked the concept of it, but I remember watching Animatrix and just not liking it, and just like because I'm an anime fan, so it's not even like it was that. But all my friends were like, yeah, and I was just like, I like the different styles, but I'm just not feeling this. And it's just one of those things that like now that I do Swordsfall, I've realized that there's a strength in pulling out all the petty nerdy stuff you didn't like, but actually being like critical about it and realistic and being like, okay, if you didn't like it, how would you do it better? So sometimes that's like I challenge myself to that stuff. I'm like, okay, you complained about this, how would you do it? So Drifter Dreams is kind of like my own like little mini like animatrix because I wanted the dream style to have like a cool dream style. And originally my idea was to have the artist be more involved with the story, but I realized like later on that they would prefer to have more of a script that they could go off of and then flourish in the art. So that's when I went with like a 100%. I made the story and then just gave them the chapter outlines. But I wanted it to have, you know, because like dreams are so strange. We all have different dreams, and even the dreams we all have are different, you know, and the way you remember a dream is different. And I felt like having one single art style, it just wouldn't have been the same. Like I wanted you to have this like almost confused feeling, and like I know that's one of the things that people sometimes don't like about Drifter Dreams, but that's kind of on purpose. I wanted you to flip the page and be like, wait, what? because
Yeah.
I feel
We're
like
in a
if you
different
think
environment.
if yeah, because like if you've ever had like a really long dream and you sat down and told someone about it, you realize that dreams are the same way. You're like, yeah. And then I was talking to them and then we were on a boat. Wait, I was on a plane before. Like, because dreams are just seamless like that. You just, your dreams, your unconscious mind has no concept of continuity. It's just like
Yeah.
cool, and the plot goes here, and so that's what happens. So I wanted Drifter Dreams to have that erratic dream feeling of cool, and now we're here because that's your dream and you have no control over it. So I wanted to be kind of a weird ride, but I think that it's one of those things. If you read it a second or third time, it clicks really well. So like, and that's kind of why I wanted it to be impactful with each page, because also like each artist has their own really cool, unique style, and with the way that like POC artists don't really get highlighted, it felt like the best way to get the most attention in like one book. So having 10 different artists was the best way to do that. I wanted more, but 10 was what I ended up with. So like it might have been even like bigger or different, but hey. But and it was also kind of like an experiment because like Welcome to Tycor was way bigger than I ever expected. Like I remind people quite often, I really did set the goal at 2000 because I really did think that I was being modest. I really truly did not expect it to blow up. I'm infinitely like pleased with it, but I wasn't expecting it. But I knew that Welcome to Tycor was going to be big at that point, obviously. And I knew my intentions was to have it be published. And by like, basically by the time the Kickstarter was over, I was starting to get nervous about like my first major book being such a major book, Like
Yeah.
I never published a book before, you know what I mean? Like I was working at another job. Like, what I mean? I was just, I feel like I'm capable of a lot of things, but it was making me nervous. I was like, oh, it's a lot of pressure for like a first time.
Yeah. It's
So
kind of like you want it to be popular, but not that popular. Holy heck.
yeah, and it's just like I was like, okay, so rather than panic about, oh God, what if the first book sucks? What if I just get it out the way? Just do something else. Just get it out the way. And so I thought doing a graphic novel would be a good way to get a book out, but also minimal risk to myself, if that makes sense. Like obviously you can lose money, but like writing the script for a graphic novel is infinitely shorter than the lore book. Like the the script for all of Drifter Dreams is half of the smallest chapter of Welcome to Tycor,
Oh,
of which
jeez.
there's 9 chapters. Like I can't explain to people how big this book is. Like it's a little daunting sometimes. So like I for me at least, how much I write, I knew it was low risk. Fun fact, I actually wrote the bulk of the plot on the plane from Portland to New York to go speak at the game devs of Color. So like I
What
write right.
about that?
I just like
Yeah. What about that plane ride made you
it was
create this?
I don't like flying. I For a very long time I was scared to death of flying. I don't like heights. I'm at the point now where I will deal with it when it has to be done, and then I'm immediately back on the ground and I'm like, cool, we're done. We're out. Like so I don't like flying, and I knew that like I needed to get my mind off of flying, and Portland to New York is the longest plane ride I had done at that time. I think that was the longest plane ride I had taken continuously in my life. So I was just like, I need to go to a happy place and just, and so I thought, hey, like that's, 6 hours of uninterrupted writing time of which you have no choice but to do this because you're not going to pay for in-flight Wi-Fi and you have no Wi-Fi. So you have nothing but music and your Chromebook. So, it was like, it was cool. So I just wrote. And in a weird way, being on the plane is a really good way to like write about hopes and fears because you're like,
It
when the
sounds
sun
like a
terminates,
nice
like
dichotomy.
everything is bad. So but I wanted to get a book out, and I just knew that a graphic novel was gonna be the best way to do it because it's really on the artist, and I love art, so it was just a easy catch all, and it I think people will realize it later on. They might not see it now until they read Welcome to Tycor, but there's more lore in Drift of Dreams than I think people realize. I've seen some reviews so far, and I'm like, okay, you'll look back later on and realize that I threw a lot of Easter eggs at you just didn't know yet. So that's just like my mentality. I love throwing hints at stuff that I know I'll do later on because I like connecting my own dots too. So, yeah, there's some stuff in there. And once you get to Welcome to Tycor, like you'll figure out. Like I was telling people on Twitter yesterday, once you read how a certain culture names their peeps, like you'll know who a lot of people are from. Like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those cool things. Yeah. You're like, oh, that's not a random last name. Oh, and that's the stuff I think about all the time. And it's cool. It just means it takes a lot longer to do stuff, you know? So,
yeah, it's
but now that I have like a lot of stuff out, I feel pretty good about it now.
Yeah. And definitely like seeing Drift of Dreams being so popular on Amazon was really cool. And seeing that pop up, like it's really cool to see something in our sphere that like is celebrated on kind of the general audience. So it was super cool to see.
They had no choice. I was annoying about it. Like people can't say they haven't heard of Swordsfall. They can just say they haven't written about me yet at this point because I've made sure that I sent out 98 emails for Drift of Dreams. So like,
I saw. I think you tweeted that at one point in time. And I was like, "Whoo!"
So you know, it's an uphill battle, but in a weird way, like I've come to just enjoy it. Like, you know what I mean? You have to not let it get you down. You're just like, cool. Like I want to be somewhere. Like I try not to quantify. I try not to be like by X time I want to be X because I don't like the feeling of feeling like you miss something. So I like to set my goals either reasonable or like I set them so high that I can't be mad when I don't hit it because it's like you knew you were setting for the moon anyway. That's ridiculous. Sometimes you do hit them because when you're like, ha, 125,000 for your Kickstarter. I don't know. just put it there for funsies. It'll be cute.
And then bam.
Yeah. And you're like, cool. And
you're even taking on another task, right? Swordsfall, an animated series. Am I correct, or is it a movie?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm planning an anime, and like with most things, I'm just having to learn the ropes. And so, like with the anime, I'm being a little bit more like not cautious. I hate that word, but I'm just trying to learn what I need to learn to make it as good as possible. But really the big thing right now is I've decided to hold on to it until after Welcome to Tycor, mainly just because like animes are expensive. I don't think people know how expensive anime is. Like I had an inkling of how expensive anime was, and then I sat down and actually talked to a studio and actually got the raw numbers, and I was like, oh, it's even more expensive than you thought. You thought it was expensive. Like, so now when I watch anime, like I'll joke to my wife. I'm like, see that scene right there? That was $1 million scene. I was like, oh, that 10 seconds? Yeah, that was like 20K right there. And it's just, I mean, because it's real. Like, I don't, once you really have an appreciation for how expensive anime is, it completely changes how you look at it. I don't know how else to put it. Like, have you seen the Castlevania anime on Netflix?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know the big fight in season 2?
Yes,
the one with the castle.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So that scene overall is about like 5-6 minutes, right? How much would you guess that is?
I am going to guess.
How much would you think that scene cost?
$5 million.
Close-ish. That's probably at least a $8 to $9 million scene just for the animation. Like anime, like when anime is fluid and you have to draw a lot of things at once, it gets expensive. So,
and it's such a beautiful fight scene too. Like,
well, people always joke about how like certain episodes in an anime will look terrible because they literally are saving their budget. Like, and we've joked about it for a long time, and I don't think people realize how accurate they were. They're like, oh, this episode quality was terrible. Must be a big fight coming up. It's true. It's really true, though. you can literally tell what is coming up. Or after you see a big fight, you may as well like hang it up and know you're going for like a low quality animation, because like that's a budget buster, like a healthy respect
Yeah.
now. I also realize how underpaid most Japanese anime artists are. Like that's another thing too. So like it's no joke. So I'm also like not a perfectionist, but I really want high quality anime. So my hope is that once Welcome to Taiko comes out and everyone's like, "Oh, this is actually awesome," then I can turn around and be like, "Cool, give me all your money for this anime," because like literally it will be as good as the money that you give. So I'm gonna do
Yeah.
that after Welcome to Taiko comes out. But honestly, it's not much of a project for me. It's a lot like the graphic novel. I I raise all the money, I build hype,
Mhm.
I go away to my cave, I build a script in like a week or two, I hand it off, and then that's it. I sit there and I wait for stuff for X amount of time. So, you know, once you finish the script, it's out of your hands, and anything else is just approving, which usually like so far from me, I've had really good experience because my artists are all great. So usually it's just me going, fantastic, fantastic, love it. This is great. I'm
Keep
crying, and
doing it.
there's really not much. You keep doing it, like so. Yeah, and then that's pretty much all. I'm just the hype man on the anime. I'm just like here to get people hyped up and be like, cool. Like I'll come up with a cool story, but how cool it looks is up to you. Same thing with voice actors. I've already like been hitting
Yeah.
up agents and stuff like that because I did con work before, so I know that deal. But it's just one of those things. Like the anime is the thing I'm looking forward to the most, and also not because it's the most money intensive. There's no creative elbow grease. You know, what I mean, you can't get around it. Like animation is
Yeah.
animation, so you know.
A lot of
And I
work. I
don't draw,
mean,
so I can't
I
help on that
feel
front.
yeah, I feel much love for Sailor Moon because I was watching through the season, and like every episode is taking up about 5 to 10 minutes of like reused scenes. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
now it makes sense.
Yep. I mean, and
Stands for
that's what you got to do. You know, like it's there's a lot of things like that that give you a better appreciation for things you love, which is like appreciate about like what I do. I get to cross over into new stuff, and I get to see behind the scenes, and I'm like, oh, that's how that works, and it's always humbling, honestly. And I personally enjoy that because I'm like, cool. I'm also that nerd who watches like all the episodes of how it's made because I don't know. I love that stuff. I love knowing how stuff is made. I'm infinitely curious.
It's always curious. Yeah, it's very interesting to see. So we are coming up at the end of time. I have one more question, and it really goes with one of my favorite characters from Drift of Dreams. During that horrific yet cool flight from Portland to New York that you took, did you conceive of the Seeker right then and there, or is it something that kind of came up later?
Pretty much right then and there. Usually when it comes to title characters, they're the ones I make up on the spot, but I make up from the world, right? Because as I'm coming up with it, heroes or people who are at the forefront always come to the mind because most organizations aren't really driven by the idea, they're driven by the person who shouts the idea the loudest. So like when I'm
Mhm.
thinking about an organization, like I always had to think about, okay, who came up with the initial philosophy that the group carries, who said that yes, this is great and carried into the modern term, and who disagreed, because there's always someone who disagreed, and they either are inside the organization as someone who's like, I'll take in another direction, or they leave and they become your competition, your side organization, your anti-organization. So I find that it's really easy to create plot when you just think about how things are made naturally. So like when I was thinking about, because I had already come up with Dreamweavers, but for Drift to Dreams, I had to come up with like the actual lore bits, right? The like, what's the name of the governing body? That stuff I don't usually do
Yeah.
until I have to, just because like it's not necessary until it's necessary, you know. But as I thought about like what the organization would be, the Kalam, which you should look up that word. It's another one of those nuggets. But like as I was thinking about the Kalam, the organization, it was like, okay, like who was the first Dreamweaver, because that's important, right? Everyone wants to know who was the first. Sometimes it's history is like, meh, and sometimes history is like, this person was like the analog, and we all wish to be this person. And with Dreamweavers, it made sense to be like, it felt a good case of explore for the first time, like someone who was like, but I really want to know what's in my dreams, but no, like I really want to know, and was the
Yeah.
first person to like try to really figure that out. You know what I mean? Maybe they weren't the first person to think about it, but they were the first person to execute it. Like they put their stamp on it, like they were Xerox, right? So that's Andromeda. And I think about it in terms of, okay, what's the legacy? Like, do people just naturally follow them? Is it just like a, it's that sort of thing. And it made sense for it to be an organization that was there to protect, because I imagine the tapestry as a Wild West, but not in a threatening way. Just in it's
Yeah.
like the ocean. Like the ocean is scary, but it's not scary. But also, we have no idea what's at the bottom of the ocean, and we all just kind of accept that, you know. And then the tapestry is the same way. No one knows like how far the tapestry goes, and then that's okay, because you have your dream and your friend's dream, and I don't know. I don't need to go to the bottom. Well, there's nothing there for me. But there's always an organization that either has to figure out what's in there because they're exploring, or maybe something comes out. So it was just that kind of thing. And I just imagine it in terms of they took the people's duty, not like kind of in the way that police officers pretend that they do, but like Dreamweavers actually
Yeah.
do it, where they actually protect people, and they do so by like showing up at your dreams and helping you out, because that's what you do, and that sort of thing. So the Seeker, and when I did Drift to Dreams, I knew I wanted to be about a Dreamweaver who fell out of love with the profession, and a Dreamweaver who was falling back in love with it. And so that's kind of how I came up with them, as I thought about like, what would that be like for the person who falls out, And it made sense to be because dreams are great, but also dreams are bad, because dreams are kind of selfish. And if you're conscious, it
Yeah.
has to weigh on you a little bit, seeing people's weird, selfish dreams day after day, right? So eventually you have to be like, and I can't even dream, and I have to see you dream about this again, and I have to help you again. What I mean? I imagine just that like that's the thing that happens to humans. We just get tired of it. And then here's Xavier just waiting for someone to fall, and he's like, oh, you said having a bad day. And then he's that guy. So, and the Seeker's the opposite. Like the Seeker's a character I'll go back later on, because I actually have like backstory I came up with her for them. And I wanted the Seeker to be that person who the people on the inside know, but you have no idea who the Seeker is, because the Seeker is kind of retired slash not in the game, and you're kind of like, but why? Everybody seems to know you, and you're barely a badass. And so I wanted that to be more of, I didn't want Drift to Dreams to be about the Seeker's backstory. I just wanted it to be about the event and give you a hint at it. Like, so by the time you get to the end, you should get a feel that like the Seeker's been there, but the Seeker got disillusioned almost in the same way as the Ripper, but didn't come out the same way. And it's that kind of like that Killing Joke, that bad day, but like in a more insightful way, in my opinion. And those are the kind of conflicts I like to write, when I don't want to write something that like you have to read a whole bunch of backstory for, because that's the point of Drift of Dreams. You can just get into it. Like you should be able to just pick it up, but it should make you really curious about it. It should make you go like, I really want to know more about this. This is a good story, but like more, please. And that's kind of Drift of Dreams.
Yeah, I think it does. So everyone who stayed to watch, thank you so much, Brandon. Thank you for showing up. Definitely
Appreciate
check
it.
out Drift Dreams, Amazon, Swordsfall website. However you would like to, of course, on the bottom to your right, if you're on Twitch, check that out. Brandon, do you have any last words?
Any last words? No. I got some new stuff that's out. I just put out a Naruto conversion called Shadow Academy. It's in early access. Check that out if you're into Naruto flavor. It's a D10 variant instead of the usual Swordsfall's combat, because I made this game like literally 16 years ago, and have just been kind of like adding to it since. And then a couple weeks ago, I was like, let's just do it. So anyway, that's the thing. Ebon Expedition will be getting the early release treatment probably early next year. And yeah, welcome to Tycor. We'll be out for real next year. Just trying to finish this giant 500-page beast. So,
well, good luck and best wishes for you on your journey. Make sure to take some time to relax during the holidays, especially with this
I
year.
have nightmares of Microsoft
And
Word now.
yeah, with that, we are going to wave goodbye, and hopefully everyone sticks around for Axon Punk if you want some hip hop infused TTRPG goodness. Which you better
stay better.